so bear with me. But we're just hopping on a second early to get people online if they want to, or that they can see everything and that I can catch up with what's going on. Right, all right. I hope everyone is doing well this morning. It's one of those things. Few minutes here or there. Not really a few minutes. There we go. Okay, so now I'm hopping on. Good morning for anybody that's seeing this a little bit early. I hope you're all doing well. It has also been hot recently, so I hope you're all staying cool for the most part, although it did rain last night where I was, so I don't know about your place. Um, we are in the middle of summertime, so I hope you guys are also seeing some very cool birds at the feeders. I know hummingbirds are starting to pick up for a lot of people as well, too, finally. So I hope you're having fun with that as well. And yeah, we're just gonna give it a second till it hits 8. Well, it did hit 8:30, so we're probably gonna start in just a second as well. But once again, I hope you guys are doing well today. You have a nice weekend, and it kind of goes from there too. So with that, I guess we're just gonna go ahead and jump right into it, right? So good morning, everyone. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord, and today we will be talking about vireos, which is always fun. And I will admit, being a songbird feeding specialist will not really hit here because vireos are not ones that we usually see at the feeders, but they are definitely ones that we can see if you happen to go on a bird walk or anything like that as well. Good morning. Thanks so much for hopping on. I appreciate it, guys. So I hope you guys are ready to learn a little bit about vireos. This is going to be just kind of a very generalized introduction. So of course there are going to be outliers to what I say, but hopefully you learn a lot and you're interested to get started. So if you have any questions during the presentation, I've got the comments up, so feel free to let me know and I will answer to the best of my ability as well too. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it. So vireos thankfully are in the family Virionidae, which makes it very easy to remember since it's just their namesake, and they are still in the order Passeriformes, which is all of our perching songbirds as well too. Good morning, guys. Thanks so much for joining. These birds prefer more wooded habitat, so you're going to find them in areas with a lot of thickets or well-developed forests as well too. Sometimes they can be in open forests, or you might even see them on like forest edges, but you're going to have a lot more of that wooded area that you're looking for them in. What's really fun is that you can actually find multiple species of vireos in the same area. So if you do find one, chances are you can find another species nearby. The greatest species diversity of vireos that you can find over here can actually be found in southwest US as well as Mexico too. So if you're ever out that way for any reason, keep an eye on the vireos and keep track of which species you find as well too. For North Carolina anyways, we do actually have a pretty decent variety of vireos. And at any point in the year, you can find at least one species. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that as well too. In this case, we do have the red-eyed vireo, which actually does make a pretty decent trip. They are more of a long-distance migrant there. In the orange kind of red color here is their summer or breeding habitat. So they go all the way up into northern Canada, and they also do cover a good portion of the US as well. This yellow section here in Central America and a little bit of South America as well as the islands over here is their migratory path. So you'll find them kind of flitting through in the spring and the fall, while the blue section here is actually their winter residency as well too. So they certainly make quite the trip to get here. So it's always fun to keep an eye out for them during this time of year as well. When it comes to the identification of vireos, sometimes they can be a little bit confusing because they may look similar to warblers who also have a lot of bright colors as well too. So some things to keep in mind is that vireos do have a slightly bigger head than warblers, and I'm not talking about their ego, I'm talking about their shape. So they do have a large head and a pretty kind of stocky neck as well too. And another thing that gives them away compared to warblers as well is that wood warblers often have kind of a thinner, longer bill that's blunted at the edge, right? These guys have more of a thicker bill that is slightly hooked at the end. It's going to be hard to see in a lot of these photos, but it is there, I promise. At the end of the beak, there's like two tooth-like little notches that can be seen in the upper bill as well too. So that just kind of helps with their diet, which we'll talk about later too. Something that I find really fun about Vireos is that you can kind of break them down into two color categories, which of course you can have some outliers slightly, but this is always fun. The first off is like what we have with the wide-eyed Vireo here. They have a slight eye ring or potentially kind of a spectacle that curls around the eye that's a brighter color compared to the rest of the colors on the head. And then they often have wing bars of some kind that you can see on the wing right here. The other group is kind of like the red-eyed Vireo that was on this page. They essentially have some form of really cool bright eyebrow or eye line above the eye, and you'll notice that they don't have any form of wing bar at all. So you can kind of set them up into those two kind of color categories as well. And in most cases, a lot of Vireos usually have a darker color on the back and the wings, and on the stomach and the belly and the breast is a kind of lighter washed color as well too. So you'll notice that, of course in this one it's a little bit hard. They have darker colors on the wings and kind of a washed out yellow or olive color on the lower side as well. You will find that males and females of Vireos look very similar, so it is hard to tell them apart. Usually they kind of look the same. They don't have any primary sexual dimorphism as of there. Let's see. So other species of vireos that you can potentially run across in the North Carolina anyways is the warbling vireo, which can be found as a summer resident up in the mountains. You'll notice it's kind of like a washed out version a little bit of the red-eyed vireo. You've got that slight eye line over the eye and no wing bars. The yellow-throated vireo is a summer resident that you can find here, which is fun. Him and the blue-headed vireo both have those little spectacles that kind of curl around the eye, and you can also see that they have those wing bars that are very present on the wings. So yeah, the yellow-throated vireo is a summer resident, and the blue-headed vireo is fun because it's a summer resident in the mountains, but it's a winter resident in the Piedmont and eastern section of Carolina, so you can keep an eye out for them as well too. And I forgot to mention the white-eyed vireo here is also a summer resident in the Piedmont area, but they dip back to year-round residency on the coastal or eastern Carolinas as well too. So you can find them on the eastern side of Carolinas throughout the year. Something that is fun about vireos is their vocalizations, just because they all sound, at least for a lot of the eastern species we have here, they all sound somewhat similar. So starting with the red-eyed vireo, they have an interesting song because essentially each little song that they have is 2 to 5 syllables. And essentially each of these syllables is mixed up and taken from a repertoire of 20 to 40 notes. So you'll find that every time a vireo sings, each time it's just a little bit different from the last, right? What is fun is that researchers found that red-eyed vireos don't share the same repertoire either. Each one is slightly different as well too, which is cool. But the cadence and the pitch is still the same, so it does kind of make it easy to figure out who you're listening to. So the red-eyed vireo sounds something like this. That is going to be way too loud for you guys. We're going to try right here. Sorry if it's still loud, but you know how it goes. Let me know if there's any issues in the comments. But this is the red-eyed vireo. So each one of those is that short little song where the cadence changes and it kind of repeats itself there. Yeah, definitely just kind of those shorter songs, but it's kind of easier to see how it repeats and how it kind of keeps the same cadence. And they do alternate between those short phrases as well. Now, something fun there is that it's very similar to other eastern species that we have. The main difference is basically the quality of the voice or the pauses in between. So I also have the yellow-throated here. Let's see, somebody read that the red-eyed vireo can make his song 20,000 times a day. They definitely sing a lot. I don't remember where, but I do know, reading through that they are one of those birds that will kind of sing continuously. So that is they're definitely very busy birds for sure, and they sing quite fast. Somebody says it almost sounds like a robin. Yeah, I will say that robins kind of have that similar pitch where they have like a short song up and then they kind of have a short song down. And there's kind of, it's been a while since I've listened to a robin, and I can't remember if they have a pause in between or a pause after those two sections, but yes, it is kind of a cadence that sounds similar to a robin, so it can be helpful to kind of play the two side by side and see the differences there, right? So another one that we have is the yellow-throated vireo. This one can sound similar to the red-eyed, except the quality is a little bit deeper and kind of burry as well too. And it's a little bit slower in between. Then we also have the blue-headed, which is this guy here. Let's see. So theirs is a little bit more I think theirs is a little bit more sing-songy, and it's a little bit more fast, kind of in between. And then the Philadelphia vireo is not the one that we have in this range for North Carolina, but I did want to bring it up because it's been known to mimic the red-eyed vireo as well too. But it's a little bit more whistly. But they all have those kind of shorter cadence songs. So it can be very interesting to kind of listen to those and parse those apart as well too. So they do definitely sing quite often, and it has been discovered that depending on the pattern and like repetition of the vireo song, you can sometimes tell when they are close to or on their nest as well too. When it comes to their diet, these birds are very much primarily insect eaters. They love a mix of caterpillars, flies, beetles, leafhoppers, and spiders. So they'll go for quite a few different types of those. That little hooked beak kind of helps them tear into those pretty easy. In times of year where insects are not as prevalent or not as available, they'll supplement their diet with a lot of different fruits or seeds. So you might see a lot more of that in the wintertime, if at all, as well too. The fun strategy that vireos use to forage is a little bit different compared to like warblers, or if you think about chickadees, right? If you've ever seen a chickadee forage, they kind of flit from place to place and kind of go pretty rapidly doing whatever they'd like. Vireos are a little bit more deliberate in their choices. So what they have a tendency to do is they kind of hop or fly between perches, and they kind of stay in one place and like constantly check to see what's going on. They'll kind of poke and probe under leaves and branches in order to find like the next insect before moving on to the next branch. So that behavior can kind of look like this as well. So you'll notice that the red-eyed vireo does stay in place a little bit. They'll kind of twist their head and check. They hop along, and then they kind of continue checking that way as well too. So that is always very nice because it does make it easier to get a lookout for your vireos as well. Because if you've ever gone bird watching, sometimes birds can move a little bit too quick. So this foraging strategy can be helpful to us if we're trying to get a better idea on who we're looking at. So that is a very common strategy for vireos to forage. So that movement can also be a little bit more particular to the vireos as well, which is fun. Now, something that is cool, so you remember how I mentioned that you can find a lot of different species of vireos in the same area. Let's see, hold on. So somebody asked if they would eat dried mealworms. See, it's one of those things where I was kind of checking, and even if they did, they don't seem like the type of bird to visit the feeders, if at all. So chances are, I don't know if even dried mealworms would be enough to entice them, or live ones, just because it may be a matter of like where they forage, that it's just kind of not their style. But I would not say it's impossible. It just depends on if you're also in the right habitat for those vireos to be nearby as well too. So I'm not going to say like no for certain, because the minute I do, I'm sure there's a vireo that's going to change its mind and totally do that, but I would say it's very unlikely. But if you were to put out any type of food for them, I would say the mealworms would be the best bet. But again, they seem to have more of a focus on a lot of live insects and don't visit the feeders very frequently. So, yeah, one thing that's interesting about vireos too is we mentioned that you can find multiple species of vireos in the same habitat. And for those of you that haven't quite considered it, oftentimes when you have a lot of birds that focus on one food item and they all eat the same food, that can deplete the resources in a habitat very quickly. So to kind of avoid this, and so that the vireos can all coexist in the same habitat, is that vireos of different species actually exploit specific niches. So in some cases, they'll actually forage on separate substrates for the same types of foods in order to kind of not run into that area of a lot of competition and trying to push the other one out because they're all focusing on this one resource, right? So what I mean by this is in the same habitat, if you have a mixed deciduous forest, so both like your maples and oaks and also like cedars and pines and things like that. If you have an area with both red-eyed vireos and blue-headed vireos in the same habitat, red-eyed vireos will focus on the deciduous plants like oaks and maples, while the blue-headed vireos will stick to more of the coniferous plants like the pines and the cedars. So they kind of stay in different locations in the same area so they don't butt heads very often. Another strategy too for those that live in a more deciduous forest, maybe they don't have that mixed forest area, or they like foraging on these same types of trees. If there's an area with red-eyed vireos and Philadelphia vireos, well, they can still be pretty competitive. Otherwise, in other ways, the Philadelphia vireo forages in higher stratums of the forest, while the red-eyed vireos might stay a little bit lower, and so they just kind of do that thing and don't butt heads that way. So it's really interesting how birds will kind of stay out of each other's way by using, but still using the same resources as well, just in different areas. And that way they're not, overusing the one resource in one location. So it kind of helps draw things out a little bit better, which is nice. Something else that they'll also do is that when winter does come around, these species can be found in mixed species flocks in the winter. So that blue-headed vireo that we have in the winter can often be found in flocks with chickadees, titmice, nuthatches, and other birds as well. So just like how the vireo species forage in different areas of the same habitat, these mixed species flocks excel in doing the same thing. So the vireo doesn't have to worry about the chickadees taking the same resource from the same area it does. They're going to focus on like different areas. So what this allows for is better use of resources, but it also, because there's more eyes in a mixed species flock and they're all kind of working together, they're able to find better food sources more quickly, and they're also better able to keep an eye out for predators in the area rather than they would be if they were foraging by themselves. So it's much easier to defend for predators and also look for food in these mixed species flocks in the wintertime. These flocks happen in the wintertime because nobody's as stressed about nesting and having proper resources for raising their young and everything like that as well too. So when that stress isn't out of the way, these birds can get along well in those types of flocks too, which is always fun to see. Now, outside of wintertime, these birds are kind of more of a solitary species, so you're not usually going to see more than a pair at one time, if at all. They can be very defensive during nesting season, so kind of as I mentioned earlier, for those species that can sing similar songs, like that Philadelphia vireo, if they are in an area where the red-eyed vireo also is, they will sing their own song as well as that slight mimicry of the red-eyed vireo to kind of keep both other Philadelphia vireos and other red-eyed vireos away from their territory. So two birds, one song, which is always nice as well too. So it kind of keeps them out of the way as well. So during this time of year, males are very defensive in their territory and they kind of defend against other vireos, while the female kind of investigates to see which territory is best and then stays with that male for the season, or at least for that nesting period as well. So oftentimes when the female starts to build a nest or check for best nesting sites, the male will kind of follow her around and also bring nesting material for her to use. When the female vireo is looking for a nesting site, she's going to often pick a more open location where there's not too many branches nearby, but it also has kind of good coverage from above as well too. So she's looking for more open clearance below the nest, but more covered area above the nest, so it's harder to see from above. When she starts building the nest, again, the male does bring resources and help her out as well too. They are basically going to build from like a fork of a branch, and they're going to build a nest right in between. And compared to other birds that might build a nest kind of on top of those branches, these birds actually suspend it underneath the branch. So they have more of a pendulous cup nest, which is really cool because essentially they use a mix of spider web, paper leaves, and other things to kind of connect this nest to the side of the branches, build the inside, and then tape it onto the other side. So this is kind of what that nest making behavior looks like, which is really cool. So essentially what they'll do is they'll kind of wrap the material around the branches, and it'll kind of settle in between the twigs instead of on top of them, which is really cool as well. So you can kind of see them playing with that material, and you'll see it weave it underneath, which I always love watching nest making behaviors because every bird has a different strategy, which is very cool as well. So, check it out and make sure it's the right size, right? So it's very cool to kind of see that behavior and see those nesting sites as well too. Now it takes 4 to 5 days for a nest to be built, and because the vireos can be loud when they sing, and they're also kind of have that one-track mind, they are a very common host species for cowbirds to lay their eggs in. So we did a presentation on cowbirds, I think, a few months ago, so if you're interested in that, feel free to check that out. But they can be a very common host species as well, the vireos, because they're pretty loud when they check things out and make their nests. I just wanted to show a few other styles of nests that vireos make. So again, you've got it where it's hooked between two branches and it hangs underneath. But each species and even each individual might use slightly different resources depending on what's available. So you might have some that focus more on lichen, some that focus more on like papery bark as well too, and some that are kind of a mix in between or smaller material with pine needles and everything like that as well. So always fun to see just the different styles. So when it comes to nesting season and the nest is finally made, vireos can have anywhere from 1 to 2 broods. Oftentimes they usually focus on one brood, but because I did mention that cowbirds can be pretty they are vulnerable to being a host species of cowbirds. I can never figure out the right way to say it. Sometimes vireos will abandon their first nesting site location or knock the eggs out as well. And kind of restart from there too, depending on circumstances. When they do lay their eggs, they're going to be more of a white color with some speckling as well too, and oftentimes lay around 3 to 4 eggs in each brood. When they start incubating, both the male and the female incubate the eggs together. What's always fun is females usually develop a brood patch when they start to incubate their eggs, which basically means they lose quite a lot of feathers on their belly in order to have more skin contact with the eggs to kind of better incubate them and control temperature. Some males can get a partial brood patch, so maybe not as large as the females, but just a smaller one to kind of help with that incubation as well too. But incubation takes anywhere from 12 to 16 days, so a little over or under 2 weeks, while nesting is 10 to 12 days, so a little under 2 weeks as well. Let's see. So somebody asked if vireos knock out the cowbird eggs or their own eggs or both. So depending on the species, and I'm a little rusty on this one, so I could be mistaken. I know that vireos actually can abandon the entire brood altogether if they notice that there's a cowbird egg in there, because they'll know that they've been compromised and they kind of just duck out that way. Other species might be more likely to kind of knock both eggs out, and I know others will actually kind of just cover the entire nest, which I think is something that vireos sometimes do as well. But I would say, slight misspeak on my part, I would probably say they usually abandon that nesting site entirely and kind of pick a different set, if they do recognize that the cowbird eggs are not their own. So sometimes they'll still raise cowbirds successfully. Other times they do notice the difference, and they kind of pick a different location as well too. So that'll be kind of that mix there as well. So after incubation, these eggs do hatch, and they are all terrestrial young, so you'll notice they don't have a lot of their feathers there. These are still in that nestling phase, so they're just starting to get their feathers in there as well too. And nesting is actually quite short, anywhere from 10 to 12 days, so a little under 2 weeks as well too. When they do fledge, they do have a tendency to remain with the parents for anywhere from 40 to 50 days afterwards. So there is a lot of parental care involved once they finally fledge the nest. Depending on the species and what's going on, it can either be a split care, so both the male and the female will take care of the fledglings from that brood, or the male might take primary care of the young while the female goes back to start incubating a second brood, or potentially goes off with another male to start another brood as well too. Kind of varies depending on the species. One thing that is interesting is that vireos do have delayed plumage maturation, which basically means that they look a little bit different when they're in that fledgling phase, and it isn't until their first year that they get the full adult plumage that you can recognize a vireo with. So red-eyed and white-eyed vireos actually have a different iris color than adults for their before their first year comes around. So red-eyed vireos actually have more of a brown eye color before they start to get that nice bright kind of red as well too, which is always fun. So that'll happen, I think, usually a few months, I think 6 to 8 months after they've fledged as well too. So kind of like I mentioned before, these are not really birds that would visit the feeders, so you may have to go out and about to kind of look for them if you'd like to. These birds do prefer more of those deciduous mixed forests to get a good mix of the different vireo species that we have, because they use those areas for both nesting and for their diet as well too. So remember, these birds do enjoy a lot of insect activity, and especially caterpillars. So a lot of those caterpillars can be seen on oaks, beeches, and maple trees. So basically looking for those deciduous forests can be very helpful in searching for your vireos. They do also search for a variety of fruits, or potentially the insects that use those fruits as well. So if you have any of these in the area, or if you want to try and make your yard more suitable for vireos, planting some of these items as well could be helpful for that. Keeping in mind of having an insect-friendly habitat, if you definitely have more of a wooded area, can help introduce like vireos to your area, or kind of keep them around as well too. So reducing pesticides where you are able to, if you use them, can be helpful not only for vireos, but a variety of songbirds and other wildlife, because you never know what can transfer to the birds, or how much that reduces their overall survival in that habitat as well. If you're looking for areas to kind of check out, different birding areas to check out, or things where to look for these birds as well too, for at least North Carolina, there's a really cool website called ncbirdingtrail.org that essentially, when you get there, you can check different areas of North Carolina, and it provides a good list of greenways or parks or hiking trails that you can check out in order to find certain birds. Clicking on each link kind of shows you what birds you may find in that area during what time of year as well. And it never hurts to look up your local birding groups. It is more fun to go birding with friends, so definitely check out who is available in your area, who's closest to you, and see if they have any trips, or if they know of any places to check out as well too. So with that being said, that's kind of all I have about vireos today. So it's just kind of very generalized information update. If you've never heard about these birds before, I find them quite fun. So definitely feel free to learn more and check them out. A lot of these songs, videos, and photos came from the Macaulay Library at Cornell Lab of Ornithology. That's, again, just a very awesome public scientific resource where people, it's just an archive of all of those resources that everybody has uploaded. So it gives you great information on bird species you've never heard before, or that you want to know more about. So definitely feel free to check that out as well, or upload your own photos and contribute there too. Allaboutbirds.org is a great generalized resource that condenses all this information together and makes it easier to learn more about your favorite species as well. And Birds of the World has a lot of scientific information for birds from all over, which is always fun as well too. So feel free to check out any of those resources too. Lastly, if you're coming in the store today, or if you want to try and make a phone order as well, I do have a coupon code for a oh my goodness, for $5 off a $25 purchase or more. So if you have any questions on that or want to use that, the coupon code is Vireo, only available today, either in store or through phone order as well too. There will be a second viewing of this presentation in store at 11, so if you know anybody in the area, definitely feel free to let them know as well too. So with that said, thank you guys so much for coming in, and I appreciate all the questions today as well too, and all the comments. I'm a little rusty in some parts, so it might have sounded a little off there, but again, I appreciate all the comments and interaction there as well too. So I hope you guys keep an eye out for a lot of your fun summertime species that we may have, and that you guys have a good weekend and a good rest of the day. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.